Red Ice Creations Radio. This is Henrik Palmgren, and we are coming to you from the west coast of Sweden. Thank you for tuning in, new or regular listeners. Good to have you here. Our website is redicecreations.com. That's the main hub for this radio show that we do twice a week, Thursdays and Sundays. We also have forums, newsletter, and a frequently updated news section on our site for your consideration. Today we have author and researcher Michael Tsarion back on the show, and we are continuing, and also with today's program rounding up our series on the Irish origins of civilization. Michael's new book is entitled The Irish Origins of Civilization, and we have a lot to talk about today. Before we kick things off, I want to mention that you can find much more of Michael's work on his website, michaeltsarion.com. That will direct you to irishoriginsofcivilization.com, terroscopes.com, and also originsandoracles.com. Take a good look around and explore the website and the material that Michael has up there for you. And the first thing I want to do is read a testimonial from Jordan Maxwell about Michael's new book. Few books have the power to shake the world to its foundations. Michael Tsarion's acclaimed book Atlantis, Alien Visitation and Genetic Manipulation falls into that category, and so does his new book, The Irish Origins of Civilization. So I'm going to welcome Michael to the program by reading a quote or a statement from Irish Origins. What does it mean to live in the age of revealing, asks Michael Tsarion. It means the light that secret societies claim to adore is finally being shone brightly upon their own orders and ideologies. It means that the sun of truth has finally risen to expose their once hidden machinery of tyranny and control. For those hot on the trail of the world's premier secret societies, this book will be an invaluable source of revelation. It alone reveals the intelligence behind royalty, masonry, Zionism, and Judeo-Christianity. A statement I found interesting that takes us into the context of our discussion, and we're going to dive into some very interesting areas here today. Druidism, the birth of Christianity, Rome, atonism, and how this connects to the systematic destruction of the Druids, which I think is a good point to start our discussion on here today, Michael.
Yes, indeed, Henrik. Thanks for inviting me back, and to also focus more on some of the themes I've been talking about in the book, themes which may be new to a lot of people, especially dealing with the rise of Christianity and the destruction of the Druids. I mean, I said before that my main interest is to try and emphasize the genocidal slaughter that attended this conquest, and that it wasn't a seamless or benign transition. Like I say in a lot of other books, this whole conquest of the Druids is just a footnote. And in many more books, in fact, of the British Israelite type, it's almost presented to you as a very benign thing, that early British Christianity, what is known as Culdeanism, because of the group the Culdeans, this early branch of Christianity is often portrayed as a semi-form of Druidism, or almost a sort of a nice, neat follow-on from Druidism. British Israelite books will always tell you that Druids were just so welcoming and so happy to have these Christians arrive, and that many Druids went on to become Christians and all of this kind of thing. And you'll even see this picked up in a lot of movies. And it's utter nonsense. It's utter propaganda. Nothing could be further from the truth. And anybody who's done, 5 minutes of homework will know that the Romans, literally slaughtered en masse the Druids, not just in Ireland, but also in Wales and Scotland and England and also in France. Wherever they found them, they annihilated them. Bards were a whole race of people that were put to the sword in a matter of months. We're talking in extremely short periods of time. Colossal violence was perpetrated. Then another form of violence, the ideological form of violence, of burning the books. St. Patrick started work on that right away. He wasn't in Ireland more than a month before he'd already started burning books. So this is the old colonialization we talked about in previous shows. Yeah. It's exactly the same thing that's going on today. It has relevance today because none of this would matter. Not one thing about what we're talking about would matter. My book would be utterly meaningless if it didn't have consequences for today.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can clinch that today. In this show, I really want to hope that we can clinch this idea of making it absolutely clear to people, as I do in talks and classes and lectures and things, what is very, very important for people again to understand how important ancient history is in a modern context.
I agree.
Because we are talking about people who have not just slaughtered and raped and mutilated. We're talking about plagiarists. People really need to get familiar with what that word means. It's the appropriation of the gnosis and the knowledge that then they claim has been burned or been lost. And again, just to emphasize this whole thing is that people need to understand that colonialization, conquest, is basically two forms of that. When a predator, when a colonialist or a empire is spreading, it really has two forms of attack. We're always familiar with the violent form of attack. Mm-hmm. Literally armed guards, armies, mercenaries moving in with the sword. The Battle of Culloden, or the conquest of the Native American Indians, or the British taking over, the India, we're always familiar with that. Where, like the Boer War, where Britain, was fighting the Dutch for the seizure of the land.
Yeah.
But, of course, the real reason why they were doing that is because they wanted the gold mines.
All the resources.
All the resources that the Boers legally had rights to in the Transvaal, right, down in South Africa. Mm. So this is no news to those people whose forefathers fought in the Boer War, It's always about land grabbing and territory grabbing. And I want to make absolutely clear that that's exactly the same thing that happened in the prehistory of Ireland. But never forget that there's two wings to this sort of, vulture of empire building. Mm. You send in the troops and you eradicate, but that is only the very first action. The next action is a much more prolonged action, and that is to do with suppression, gradual suppression, supplanting, right? Appropriation of the knowledge, ideological indoctrination.
Yeah.
It's almost like the Fabian way, of modern day politics was already going on thousands of years ago. What they call the war of attrition, a very slow, gradual process of war. Mm-hmm. It's no less violent, but it's a war on the language, on the tradition, on the customs, on the culture, on the behavior of people, so that they become utterly foreign. And then they have Stockholm syndrome. They literally now start identifying with the oppressor, because the oppressor is literally so strong, so powerful, so capable, so moneyed, that you start to emulate their way. They literally are the kings on the hills. Mm-hmm. The hill. You're the villager. They are the elites. And they structure the towns and the societies. You have no free will. And so they've subdued you and they've globalized you in your mind.
Yeah.
And this is no different than it's happening exactly in today's world as it began to happen thousands of years ago. It's the same families that are doing it, basically. Same descendants.
Interesting. And I guess we could begin also to talk here about the different waves of visitation that came to Ireland. And I guess we can even tie this back even to the Atlantean days, right?
It all goes back to that. My book is part 2 of, my work on Atlantis. It's a follow-on of the Atlantis book. In fact, I had to sort of do the Atlantis book first in order to get to this subject matter. This is the subject matter I'm really concerned about, which is the spreading of the elements of civilization that I believe happened from the west to the east. And I wanted to deconstruct. That's my work. My work falls under alternative history because I want to deconstruct the myth, the lie that the elements of civilization spread from the east to the west. But most of these, all Irish mythology, British mythology, if you read it, all absolutely confirms the fact that Britain, meaning England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and all the islands off the shores were remnants of Atlantean culture.
Mm.
In fact, some of the most astounding writings about Atlantis don't come from Plato. And again, this is another misnomer that the finest works on Atlantis, are to be found amongst the Greeks.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on here with this. The greatest commentary on the pre-Diluvian era is actually to be found in Irish mythology. And it's sad that I'm one of the only people that actually deals with this, in a big way. I mean, others have written on it to a certain extent, but the legends are full of it. And one of the most intriguing things that they talk about is the waves of invasion or the waves of visitation. Mm-hmm. Whether you believe that Ireland, England were remnants of Atlantis, or that the Atlanteans, after the deluge, after the flood, arrived on Ireland, is up to you. There's different theories there, but there was basically several waves. They claim that there was the Fomorian race, and my book explains who they are, the original inhabitants of this area, and they're always described as sort of giant-like, or even hybrid-like, deformed.
Really?
Oh, yeah. The Fomori, they're called, and Fomori is a word that actually means the giants, the great ones. These are sort of like your Greek titans, or the Cyclopean beings.
Sheesh.
That all mythology talks about, especially the Scandinavian mythologies also speak about these kinds of beings that have, just a lot of weird features, that they seem to be crossbred between animals and human beings.
The Jotun or Jotun, I think, is one.
Yeah, this
Nordic.
is the Nordic, yeah, of course. And you just have the great giants. All the high legends of the world talk about this type of being, especially in Jason and the Argonauts. You see all the trials of Odysseus or what have you. All the heroes. Hercules meets these strange beings, hybrid beings. Well, this is what Irish mythology also talks about. And then there's meant to be a biblical tie-in with the next wave, which is actually a woman, a granddaughter of Noah, and her name was Kasser. I'm not saying I believe in all these, waves of invasion. A lot of this is spurious.
But they're out there. They're myths.
Yeah,
right?
These are legitimate myths,
yeah.
That talk about visitations in the earliest times. Then there's a people called the children of Partholan. This is the third wave, a hero, a king, who brought a small group of people to colonize Ireland, again after the flood. And these are people who were torn by the flood, you see, and decimated by the flood. And they were trying to survive it. Then after that comes a related group called the children of Nemed, after the king Nemed, and they claim that's about 3000 BC. The dates are highly spurious, could have been a lot earlier.
Sure.
Then after Nemed's children, the people of Nemed, they were all destroyed by plague. And then there's a more traditionally accepted group called the Iberians. This word Iberia is a very important word because it may in fact be the root of the word Hiberia or Hiberu. Right? The Iberu. In fact, one of the ancient names of Ireland is Iberia.
Yeah. One
of the ancient names of Spain is Hiberia with an H on the beginning.
All right.
Yeah. So the very word Iberian is very interesting. But the Iberians were 3 separate tribes under the same heading.
Okay.
Of which the most important tribe was being a group called the Fir Bolg. And the Fir Bolg, people have had trouble translating that term. It actually really means the men of wisdom.
Okay.
The Fir Bolg are the elite group within the Iberians, and these are settlers in Ireland. And the Fir Bolg, the Iberians are the longest reigning inhabitants of all these waves, until, of course, you come to the historical age where men,
the last
mortals,
wave here,
until down to the present day.
Yeah.
God knows how long they're going to be around, but before that, in the prehistoric, or what they call the mythological cycle, the Iberians were the longest running. And they had power. They were magicians. Many of the ancient sites that you'll go and visit, and you'll see standing in Ireland, date from these so-called Fir Bolgs and so on. So
interesting.
They're a very important